Hey guys, welcome to Budget RC. As you can see, today we're building the Hazzard County Sheriff's Department police car, complete with Roscoe on the inside.
I love it, I love it!
And this is the first time I've ever done a 3D printed body for an RC, and it was a big project for me. I ended up having so many problems painting the first body that I had to start over, and this is actually the second one. But this time I was able to see it through to completion, and I couldn't be happier with where we're at. One of the really cool things about this project is that you really get out of it what you put into it. If you take your time and really put some effort into sanding and smoothing the body and prepping it properly for paint, you can end up with a car that really doesn't even look like it came off of a 3D printer. It really looks like a nice hard body, which was the result that I was going for. It was a lot of work to get it here, but I think it was worth it. This car really looks great. And now I've got a car to chase the General Lee with. So anyway, we're going to go right back to the beginning with just the printed pieces of this body, and I'm going to take you through step by step. You'll see some of the mistakes that I made so that hopefully you can avoid those if you're going to do a 3D printed car. And hopefully you'll learn a few tips to help make your journey a little bit easier. If not, you can just enjoy it and see how I did this for myself. So anyway, let's get it going. So right now, we are at the very beginning of this process. And what you see in front of you is the 3D printed body in its 4 original pieces off of my printer. And right now, even though it may not look it in the video, these pieces are really pretty rough. There's still a lot of junk that's on the surface here. You can see some very deep printing lines, and there's just an awful lot of cleanup to do. And this is actually my second attempt at this. On my first attempt, I ran into some big time problems when I was painting, and I ended up abandoning the project. However, that was done with PLA. This print I decided to use with PETG because it's got a little bit higher resistivity to temperature. PETG can start to sag or deform when it's out in the sun for too long. And I didn't want that to happen because I know from that process of just how much work goes into making this body look good. So this is PETG, which is a lot harder to print nicely. And I'm still working through learning how to get my printer to play nice with PETG. So now that I've got this printed, I want to give you guys just some basic printing tips. First of all, why is this in 4 pieces? Well, the first and most obvious is that you don't necessarily have room on most 3D printers to do it in one piece. To do something this large requires a very large printer. I do have a relatively large printer. My printer has a print area of about 300 millimeters in each direction. However, that said, I still can't fit this body in one piece. So it would have had to be split at minimum into 2 pieces. But I also chose to separate the front and rear fascias from the body and print them separately. And there's a couple of reasons for this. Choosing your proper print orientation can save you a lot of time when you print. If we look at just this piece here, if I printed it just like this entire area would have to fill up with support material to support these flat surfaces. And this print alone would be 2.5 days roughly to do it in this orientation. By simply standing this up, now you can see there's a lot of open space, so there's significantly less printing that's necessary because you don't have nearly as much support. Likewise, if I were to keep this on top of here, it would do away with most of that benefit because now you'd have support built up through this entire area, and this would be a huge print time and it would waste a ton of material. So we take this off, and now we have a much more efficient print. The other benefit to doing this is that I can change my print resolution. For something like this where all the detail is, I want a really tight resolution, and I printed this and the rear fascia at a 0.1 millimeter layer height. That way I can retain as much detail in this portion of the print as possible. But on these sections, That type of print resolution really isn't necessary. This is large and flat, and no matter what resolution I use, I'm going to end up needing to sand and fill this in order to get it to be smooth and flat anyway. So rather than the 0.1 layer height, these sections were printed at a 0.2, which cut the print time around in half for these individual pieces. And that's really important when you're dealing with such large objects, because even with these efficiencies in mind, this piece alone was like a 28-hour print. This one was about a 24-hour print. This one ended up being about a 24-hour print. And this one was somewhere between 15 and 20 hours. I don't remember specifically. But if you add that up, that's like 3.5 days worth of print time for this body. So you can see that it's really important to try to maximize your efficiencies where you can. So now the next step is going to be to clean these bodies up as well as I can, get them as close to a perfect fit as I can, and continue to smooth them and get them ready to glue together. And what I want to do is to try and do as much of the finish work as possible while they're separated. Once you glue them together, the stakes get higher. If you have some sort of a catastrophic error or mistake, you have to start over. If we have a catastrophic mistake at this point, I only have to reprint that one section. Additionally, this gets cumbersome and difficult to handle when you've got one big piece all put together, especially knowing that it's relatively fragile. By working on these pieces individually, they're easier to work on. I can handle them more easily, I can manipulate and move them, I can reposition them for different sanding techniques, etc. So that's going to be the plan now, is to try to get as much finish work on the individual sections as I can feasibly do before I do the glue up. So let's get going on that, and I'll bring this back when I've made some progress on the finishing. So now we're back, and you can see that the body looks a whole lot different. What I did here was to apply a couple of coats of putty and then sand those coats of putty off until things were basically pretty flat. There's still a lot of work to do. There's still some holes, there's still some bumps, but now you can start to get a little bit of an appreciation for how much work this body is going to need if I don't want it to look like a 3D printed body. So I think what we're going to do now is a little bit more with the putty, and then I'm going to get it into primer. Once it's in the primer, it'll be all one color, and it'll give me a little bit better perspective to be able to see some of the imperfections that maybe are a little hard to see right now. And because it's a high build primer, it'll help with the process of getting this body where I need it to be. So let's go do that. And now it's all primed. And as you can see from the B-roll footage, it already looks a whole lot better. And in fact, if I were to just go right ahead and paint this white right now, it would probably be good enough for the YouTube videos that I want to use this for. But I want to make this look as good as I can, so I'm going to keep going. That means I'm going to be sanding this down, doing more putty and more sanding, and more priming. Hopefully not too many iterations of that, but I'm going to do what it takes so that I'm going to be satisfied with it as almost as a shelf queen type of quality once I get it done. So let's keep moving it forward, and I'll show you guys what this looks like before we spray the white on it. So now that you can see that we have it all primed up, and just like I had said, I put a coat of primer on that gave me the ability to see some more of the defects. I filled those defects with putty, sanded, and re-primed. And here we are. And in terms of putting the body together, I learned a trick or two from the last time I did one of these, even though I didn't end up having success with the overall process. What I learned was that putting the body together, especially these two pieces here, is pretty difficult to get everything lined up all the way around. And so what I did this time was to use more Kydex. And you can see I've got a big piece glued to the roof here, and then I've got these strips on the doors that are glued in. And this is going to give me the ability to put this together, and not only does it give me more gluing surface, but it helps to get everything lined up where it needs to be. And I think this is going to help me do a better job of putting the pieces together, which will minimize the amount of work I need to do afterwards. Plus, I think these pieces are going to help add considerable strength to the body, which is always a good thing when you're talking about a 3D print. Now for the front and rear pieces, I'm going to do more of the same. I've got these flat spots here, and I'm just going to make little tiny pieces that I can use to locate this onto the front and likewise this piece onto the back. So that's the next step, to get this thing glued together, get all of these seams taken care of, and then hopefully we can put it into paint. Well, it's white. I'm not exactly thrilled with how it came out, but I am happy that at least it's all white. What you guys may not know is that this is the second body I've done. Way back last year, I printed a body, and I got it all the way to this point. And when I clear coated it, it caused all of the paint underneath to just lift up. And I stripped it, redid it, and had the same problem again. And by that point, all of the detail in the front and rear areas was just completely wiped out, and I had to scrap it and start over. So I was very apprehensive when I got to this stage. And even this time, when I put the white on, I did get a little bit of that lifting on the hood, but I was able to sand it out and get the clear on. So the other thing you can see now is that it's on the chassis. And I wanted to take you guys real quickly through that and show you how I decided to mount this vehicle. So this is actually the same Kyosho chassis that I used for the first General Lee. This is the car that came with the orange body from Kyosho. The reason I bought that gray Kyosho Charger was because I knew I wanted to have another one of these same chassis to use for the police car. And I went with that gray Charger because that was the brushless upgraded model right from Kyosho. So I transferred the orange body to that vehicle, which left me with that original brushed chassis to use here. And the only changes I had to make to this were to the mounts. On the rear, I had to take the mount, which was originally angled forward from the body post, and I wanted to move it to the back so that it was on the trunk area instead of right over the window. I did that by just turning the mount around and using longer screws along with some spacers to move this back where I wanted it. The only thing I had to do in the front was change the height of the posts. Now to hold the body on, I didn't want the body post to stick through the body, so what I chose to do was to glue these washers on to these posts and then use these 1-inch Neo magnets that have a hole in the middle on the body. And the way it works is that these will mount right in there and hold really strong. Really strong. I've actually got some plastic spacers that I'm going to be gluing onto here to keep these separated a little bit just so it doesn't grip so tight, because right now it's too hard to get the body off. Underneath you can see we've just got 4 of these magnets positioned in the right spots so that when we put the body together we get a nice solid connection. Like I said, at this point the connection's a little bit too solid. It's hard to get this body off, but it's obviously not going to go anywhere either. So now the next step is to get this thing to the final stretch. We're going to get all the trim painted up, we're going to get the decals on, and then I've got to work on windows. So let's go after that. Well, we're making progress. As you can see, we're all mounted up, and of course the body you saw was painted already. Now I've got all of the chrome trim painted using that chrome pen, which includes the whole front, the whole rear, as well as all the trim around the openings. I've got the light bar mounted, and I have an interior with a driver. One other trick I have up my sleeve is that we're all wired up. You can see we've got the headlights up front, we've got the tail lights in the back, and of course we've got the police lights on the roof. And none of this is finalized yet. I've still got a lot of work to do on these things. I've got to clean up my wiring. Right now it's visible through the interior. And I think the biggest thing is that I'm not really thrilled with how these headlights look because they're so blue. So I've got some warm white LEDs on the way that I'm going to swap out so that it looks a little bit more correct. Once those are installed, I can glue my headlight lenses over it, which should help as well. On the back, I've already got the taillight lenses all detailed and glued in, so they're good to go. One more thing you can see is that I've got my 3D printed hubcaps on, and that really helps sell the whole look of this police car. So we're getting really close now, and I'm getting excited because I can't wait to have this thing all done. one of the big things that we still have left is windshields. Still got to do a front and a rear window. So let's keep going. So now I'm back with a quick update. I was able to get those warm white LEDs installed into the headlight buckets, and those are a huge improvement. So now I want to turn my attention to the windshields. And in order to do this, obviously I need some clear Lexan. And I didn't have any body scraps that were large enough, and I didn't want to go out and buy any more Lexan. But what I did have were some of these face shields that I was able to pick up on clearance real cheap a couple of years ago. And they're even made in
USA, greatest country in the world.
Unfortunately, they're thinner than I would prefer, but they're all that I have, so for now I'm going to use them. I'm just going to take it easy with the glue so that I can get these out later when I get some thicker Lexan. Now, in order to make these, what I did was start with some cardboard templates. I've got my front windshield here, and I've got the rear one here. And I've got them so that they fit up nicely on the inside. I transferred them to one of those face shields. Now I have these. Now, in order to install these, what the plan is going to be is to put them into position, and I'm going to put one piece of tape right at the top so I can flip it up with it still in position, put a few spots of glue, and then just put it back down. That'll minimize the amount of smearing I get from the glue, and it should make it look a whole lot better than if I just wing it. But like I said, I'm only going to use a few spots of glue right now because I do plan on taking these back out after I get some thicker Lexan to use. But let's go ahead and get that done. While I'm working on that too, I think I'm going to go ahead and get these side markers painted, and I may even get it stickered up. Let's see how it goes. And here it is. It's all finished. And what that means is that I was able to get the windows in. I got the interior in for the last time, this time complete with Roscoe, all painted up. I've got the decals on. I've got the headlights swapped with the headlight covers on. And I've even got the side marker lights painted. So now she's all done. And I'm super, super happy with how this one came out. It's been a ton of work to get it to where it's at. You just saw that I went right from the bare printed body right up to a completely finished car. And the overall look is really very much like a hard body. It's not perfect, but it's really close, and I'm super happy with that. And it just goes to show that you really get out of it what you put into it when it comes to a project like this. If you don't mind taking the time to sand the body, make sure it's put together well, prime it, sand it, rinse and repeat, you get yourself to a point where you end up with a finished result like this. And I hope this was helpful for any of you guys that are considering doing a 3D printed RC car project. And of course, the finishing touch has to be the lights. I love how the lights look, from the headlights to the roof lights all the way to the tail lights. Just really happy with how these all came out. I feel like it's really the finishing touch on this car. So anyway, guys, if you're still here with me all the way from the beginning when you saw the bare body to this, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. And most of all, I hope it motivated you to try something similar. And I also hope that you'll stick around for my future videos. I have another General Lee video coming up that's going to be a big change from the last two. And it's going to be something that I think is going to be more accessible to a lot more people, because it's going to be a much more simple and basic build. I also have a surprise coming up, so I hope you guys will stick around for that. That's it for me. I'm going to get this out there, and I've got the Duke boys to go chase.
I'm Duke boys. I got 'em this time. I got 'em this time. Ain't no way they're going to get by this rock block. I love it. I love it.